Charlie Kirk never imagined that the people he trusted the most could be plotting his death. But when cryptic letters, sabotaged cars, and shadowy figures began appearing, his world spiraled into a nightmare no one saw coming. Charlie Kirk's life seemed ordinary at first glance. He moved through his days with a calculated routine, attending meetings, giving speeches, and navigating the complex world of politics with the confidence of someone who believed in his purpose. To the public, he was a figure of influence and respect, a man whose opinions mattered and whose presence commanded attention. But behind the polished exterior, shadows were beginning to gather. Strange events, subtle and easily overlooked, hinted that something far more sinister was brewing. It started with the letters. At first, they seemed like nothing more than fan mail or misguided admirers, but as the weeks passed, the tone shifted. The messages became cryptic, almost threatening, filled with phrases that spoke of consequences and warnings without ever naming a reason. Some of the letters contained unusual symbols, shapes that no one could recognize or interpret. Charlie initially dismissed them as nuisances, yet the tension they created began to seep into every aspect of his life. His security team grew uneasy, noticing the meticulous effort put into masking the sender's identity. Then came the shadowy figure near his home. Residents reported seeing someone loitering late at night, always dressed in dark clothing, always disappearing before anyone could approach. Security cameras caught fleeting images, grainy and indistinct, but enough to set off alarms. The figure appeared to watch the house for hours, vanishing only when the early morning light crept across the streets. Charlie's usual sense of safety at home began to erode. He started checking doors and windows obsessively, noticing every sound in the otherwise quiet neighborhood. Electronic malfunctions followed. Phones would cut out mid-conversation, cameras in his office would freeze or flicker, and devices essential to his communication and security failed at inexplicable times. Specialists were called in, but no one could pinpoint the cause. Every technical anomaly added to a growing unease that something was very wrong, that someone was preparing for more than mere intimidation. Even the smallest details, the way the mail would be moved, the occasional misplaced keys, the faint scratches on doors, began to feel deliberate, part of a puzzle that no one could yet see in full. Despite all these signs, life around Charlie carried on normally, masking the danger in plain sight. Friends and colleagues noticed a subtle change in his demeanor. He was more alert, more cautious, constantly scanning rooms and streets. Yet outwardly, he maintained the appearance of confidence and composure. The tension was building silently, like a storm gathering on the horizon, unnoticed by those not paying close attention. The first chapter of this story was a warning unheeded. Small disruptions, strange occurrences, and fleeting shadows hinted at a threat that was coming, a danger that would escalate in ways unimaginable. For Charlie Kirk, the calm before the storm was anything but ordinary. It was the quiet, uneasy beginning of a nightmare, one that would test every instinct, every relationship, and every moment of trust he had ever known. The ordinary life of an influential man was slowly unraveling, thread by thread, leaving behind a growing sense of dread that no one could ignore. The first attack came unexpectedly, shattering the fragile sense of security Charlie had managed to maintain. It happened on an evening that seemed ordinary, a night when the city was quiet and the streets were dimly lit. Charlie was driving home after a long day, the familiar route offering a false sense of comfort. He felt the usual hum of the engine beneath him, the simple rhythm of travel lulling him into a momentary calm. That calm was violently interrupted when he noticed the brakes responding oddly, sluggish and unpredictable. Instinctively, he managed to control the car just in time, swerving to avoid what could have been a fatal crash. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but their investigation yielded no clear answers. The brakes had been tampered with, expertly cut in a way that left no fingerprints, no trace of the perpetrator. It was a precise, calculated act, one designed to terrorize and potentially kill. This first attempt was followed by a second, even more brazen, at a private event that Charlie attended weeks later. The atmosphere had been cheerful, with supporters gathered to hear him speak and celebrate his influence. But as he moved through the crowd, a single sniper shot pierced the air, striking the wall just behind him. The sound was deafening, the echo of near death haunting every attendee. Panic erupted, and security rushed to evacuate Charlie and those around him. Investigators scoured the area, examining every angle, yet the shooter remained invisible. No camera captured the face, no witness could provide a clear description, and no motive beyond the act itself could be discerned. The message was unmistakable. Charlie's life was under direct threat, and the attackers were willing to strike in public with precision and impunity. The city was gripped by fear. News outlets reported the attacks, and speculation ran rampant, but authorities struggled to find leads. Every investigation seemed to hit a dead end, every clue evaporating into uncertainty. The attackers' methods were sophisticated, almost surgical, leaving no evidence that could point to their identity. The unpredictability of the threat created an oppressive tension, a sense that danger could strike anywhere, at any time. Charlie's daily routines became exercises in vigilance. Security measures were increased, routes were altered, and protective teams expanded, but the shadow of the unknown hung heavy over him. What made these attacks especially disturbing was the sense of deliberate escalation. The first incident was almost a warning, a near miss that might have been ignored. The second was a statement of intent, a clear signal that those behind the attempts were organized and unrelenting. Each failed attempt added to the psychological toll, eroding the boundaries between safety and threat. Friends and colleagues noticed the strain, the constant tension etched on Charlie's face, but the full scope of the danger remained invisible to all except him and those closest in his security circle. By the end of this period, it became painfully clear that these were not random acts of violence. They were calculated, targeted, and executed by someone or some group who understood both his schedule and his vulnerabilities. The attacks were designed not only to harm, but to instill fear, to fracture the confidence of a man who had always relied on control and strategy. In this unfolding nightmare, Charlie realized that survival depended on more than instinct. It required uncovering the identity of those who lurked in the shadows, a task that would prove far more complex and perilous than he could have imagined. As the investigation into the attacks deepened, shocking truths began to emerge. What initially seemed like random threats or the work of an unknown adversary slowly revealed a far more personal and calculated danger. Investigators discovered that Charlie had been closely followed for months by someone he trusted, someone who had been part of his inner circle. This realization sent a wave of disbelief through everyone involved. The very person who had access to his schedule, his private meetings, and even his personal communications was secretly feeding information to unknown enemies. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical threat, undermining the very foundation of trust Charlie had relied upon. Financial records became a critical piece of the puzzle. Sudden, unexplained transfers to offshore accounts raised alarm. At first, these seemed unrelated to the assassination attempts, perhaps part of standard business transactions. But investigators noted patterns that suggested coordination and secrecy. Money had been moved with precision and purpose, as if to fund an operation beyond ordinary comprehension. The fact that someone close to Charlie had knowledge of these movements added another chilling layer. It was no longer just about protecting a public figure from an external threat. It was about uncovering the hidden actions of someone within, someone who had carefully manipulated the situation from behind the scenes. Emails and digital communications offered further evidence of betrayal. Personal messages, meant to be private, were being intercepted or redirected. Notes between trusted associates hinted at motives and connections that had remained invisible to outsiders. Investigators pieced together fragments of conversations, discovering that Charlie's movements had been tracked, his vulnerabilities noted, and opportunities for attack identified long before the first attempt occurred. The meticulous nature of this surveillance pointed to a mind that was patient, calculating, and dangerously precise. Every step Charlie took had been watched, every plan he made had been undermined, and every sense of security he once relied upon was now suspect. This realization changed the course of the investigation. The threat was no longer abstract. It was intimate. The focus shifted from broad security measures to identifying the individual who had infiltrated Charlie's life. Interviews, background checks, and deep dives into personal histories revealed subtle inconsistencies in behavior, unexplained absences, and unusual contacts with unknown figures. Each discovery painted a picture of someone who had carefully cultivated trust only to exploit it. The psychological impact on Charlie was immense. The knowledge that betrayal came from within his own circle made every interaction fraught with suspicion, every ally a potential enemy. The implications extended beyond personal danger. The network of betrayal suggested coordination with external forces, a plan so intricate that the full scope remained hidden even as fragments emerged. The investigation exposed the terrifying possibility that Charlie's life had been compromised for reasons far beyond political rivalry or personal grudges. What began as a series of attacks now appeared to be part of a larger scheme, one that blended obsession, betrayal, and meticulous planning into a threat that no amount of ordinary security could fully counter. Each revelation pushed the story further into darkness, showing that danger often comes from the places we least expect, and that the people we trust the most can sometimes be the ones who put us in the gravest peril. As the investigation widened, the extent of the conspiracy became more terrifying. Authorities began to uncover a hidden network of individuals, connected not by chance but by shared obsession and extreme ideologies. These were people who operated in the shadows, communicating in encrypted channels, coordinating their movements with precision, and targeting figures like Charlie with ruthless determination. It became clear that the attacks were not isolated incidents carried out by a single person, but part of a larger, organized operation. The scale of it sent chills through investigators, who realized that they were dealing with a group that had resources, knowledge, and patience far beyond ordinary criminal activity. Phone records revealed unusual patterns. Calls were made at odd hours, often through disposable devices or routed through multiple countries to obscure their origin. Locations that had previously seemed unconnected now formed a disturbing map of surveillance and preparation. Investigators tracked movements to remote warehouses, abandoned buildings, and even hidden compartments in urban areas that had been modified for clandestine activity. Every clue suggested a high degree of planning and collaboration, and the group's network seemed to stretch across state lines. It became clear that Charlie's attempts on life were part of a coordinated campaign, a web of activity designed to intimidate, isolate, and ultimately eliminate him. Drone surveillance added a visual confirmation of the threat. Late at night, drones captured figures moving near Charlie's residence, sometimes in pairs, sometimes alone. They were careful, moving silently, watching and retreating without leaving traces. The investigators noticed patterns in their appearances, specific nights, particular times, and locations that suggested both observation and preparation for a larger, more dangerous act. The level of sophistication was staggering. These were not amateurs. These were people who had studied him, understood his routines, and adapted their actions to avoid detection while maintaining the constant pressure of threat. Encrypted messages were eventually decrypted, revealing chilling content. References to a final step appeared repeatedly, along with instructions and diagrams that suggested coordination for an ultimate plan. The messages implied surveillance, sabotage, and even potential violence, creating a sense of imminent danger that loomed over Charlie's every move. The investigators realized that they were racing against a timeline that no one had yet fully mapped, and that failure to act quickly could result in catastrophic consequences. The network's patience and strategic thinking made them unpredictable, and the more authorities uncovered, the more complex the situation became. The revelation that Charlie's life was being threatened by an organized group changed everything. Security measures were no longer enough. Investigators had to understand not just who the attackers were, but how they operated, who supported them, and what their ultimate goal might be. Each discovery painted a picture of a dangerous and meticulous system, one that had penetrated both personal and professional boundaries. It was a stark reminder that some threats are not visible until it is almost too late, and that surviving the immediate danger requires uncovering the intricate web of forces that work quietly in the background, unseen but relentless. The hidden network had turned Charlie's life into a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty, where every step forward brought new dangers, and every shadow might conceal a threat that could not be anticipated. The most shocking revelation came when investigators finally identified the mastermind behind the assassination attempts. It was someone no one had suspected, a figure who had publicly supported Charlie, attending rallies, praising him online, and presenting themselves as a loyal ally. The realization sent shockwaves through everyone involved in the case. The person who had been closest to Charlie, who had shared conversations, offered advice, and built trust over time, was secretly orchestrating attacks with calculated precision. Motive remained murky at first, but fragments of personal writings uncovered during the investigation painted a disturbing picture of obsession, resentment, and a desire for control. Diaries and journals revealed an escalating fixation on Charlie, blending admiration with envy, and ultimately transforming into a plan for murder. The entries chronicled every moment the mastermind observed, noting schedules, habits, and vulnerabilities with an obsessive eye. Each failed attempt was recorded with frustration and determination, demonstrating patience and meticulous planning. What initially seemed like random acts of violence now made sense as part of a carefully designed strategy. Every warning letter, every tampered device, every shadowy figure had been orchestrated to unsettle, manipulate, and terrorize. The scale of dedication to such a dark goal was unprecedented, and the personal nature of the betrayal made it even more chilling. Despite the discovery of the mastermind, the danger had not passed. Authorities moved quickly to apprehend the individual, only to find that they had vanished. Surveillance footage captured fleeting images of a figure disappearing into the night, leaving behind no trace. It became apparent that the mastermind had anticipated every step, leaving no opportunity for capture and ensuring that even the revelation of their identity did not guarantee safety. The city remained on edge, aware that someone capable of such planning could strike again, and that the full extent of their network might never be entirely known. The aftermath left Charlie and those around him in a state of heightened caution. Trust became a fragile commodity, every relationship scrutinized, every interaction examined for hidden motives. The psychological toll was immense. Charlie had survived physical attacks, but the realization that betrayal had come from within his circle left an enduring scar. Investigators worked tirelessly to map connections, trace financial flows, and monitor communications, but the mastermind's disappearance created a persistent sense of uncertainty. Even small, ordinary events, unexpected phone calls, unusual deliveries, or unfamiliar faces, triggered anxiety, a constant reminder of the danger that had almost claimed his life. The story concluded without a clear resolution, leaving a haunting sense of unease. The mastermind's motives, while partially understood, were never fully explained, and the possibility of future threats remained. Charlie survived, but his life was irrevocably changed, shadowed by the knowledge that danger often comes from the most unexpected places and the people we trust the most. The assassination attempts had revealed the dark side of obsession, the meticulous nature of premeditated violence, and the terrifying reality that even in a world full of safeguards, one person's determination can create a nightmare that no amount of vigilance can completely escape. The final chapter underscored a chilling truth. Survival is never absolute, and the unseen threats lurking in plain sight are sometimes the most dangerous of all.